evening, and welcome to XKCD Comes to Dartmouth. So, while planning this event over the past 5 months, I've had the pleasure of being able to tell many of you individually the good news about Randall's visit. And every time I told someone that I was planning this event, I got a particular type of response. A response that I think shows the enthusiasm that pretty much this entire school has for XKCD. Exactly. So, in support of, and in order to foster this enthusiasm, I'd like to share a few examples of those responses with you tonight. So, one time I was having lunch with a group of engineers outside a Longtuck Mall, and one young woman, upon hearing the news, got so excited that she actually screamed, so loudly that the sound reverberated all up and down the street. And what's more, this occurred at the president's cookout. Another time, I was spontaneously hugged by someone I had just met, and another time, I was proposed to by someone I had never met. I had to decline the proposal on the principle that I just can't accept marriage offers communicated via blitz. So those are a few particular examples. But then there are the rest of you. I have received so many emails saying, "I'm so excited about this event, sign me up for the blitz list, how can I help?" Now, recall that I said that this event has been 5 months in the planning. And trust me, it's been worthwhile. But on the other hand, it has soaked up time and energy, and sometimes I start to feel essence of my soul. So, to every one of you who sent one of those emails and contributed that extra little life-sustaining spark of enthusiasm, God bless you. You have no idea how much your contribution means. And, well, since I seem to be invoking God's favor upon our supporters, I would like to thank our sponsors. As our posters say, probably more organizations than you even knew existed on campus. So those organizations are the Math Department, the Physics Department, the Computer Science Department, the Dean of College, the President's Office, COSO, College Governing Board, Alpha Theta, the Dartmouth Mathematical Society, Creative Gaming Club, the Graduate Student Council, and Thayer Council. Also, thank you. That did take a little practice. Also, thank you very much to all my wonderful volunteers, and especially Max Lifson, Michael Diamond, and James Oakley. But that's enough about us. What about this fellow, Randall Munroe? Well, Randall Munroe graduated from Christopher Newport University with a degree in physics in 2006. He worked for a time at NASA, and now he manages my all-time favorite webcomic from his home in Massachusetts. Now, I've done my research, and I realize that Randall has spoken at some prestigious institutions in the past, and these institutions have set up a sort of series of traditions associated with his visit. Therefore, I feel obligated to mention that tomorrow at lunch, we too will have a cake shaped like the internet. And also, I have a few things to give you if you'd like to come up here. Firstly, a lovely Dartmouth t-shirt.
Well, thank you.
And also, Creative Gaming Club, which will be hosting our party tonight in Common Ground at 8 o'clock, it's going to be some party, was very eager to be remembered fondly by you, so they have donated no fewer than 2 t-shirts.
Sweet, thank you.
It says, "Get your nerd on."
Awesome.
And also, so I got a t-shirt from some Asian American student organization, so here you go.
Awesome.
I have no idea where it came from, but it looks like you won't have to do laundry for a while.
Awesome.
And one more.
At least 3 more days.
Yeah. one more perhaps uniquely Dartmouthy offering, I have Aporia, the philosophy journal. As a matter of fact, this issue came out only yesterday, and the theme is the Vienna Circle, which is celebrating its centennial this year.
Oh, yeah.
The Vienna Circle... Well, Vienna Circle was a group of philosophers that met to discuss math and physics and related topics. So we thought it appropriate to put your webcomic Certainty on page 63.
Oh, well, thank you.
It's there.
Aw, thanks.
Although, as our editor-in-chief has said, the period of 1906 to 1910 was kind of a murky one for the Vienna Circle because it wasn't really an official organization, so we might as well as not be correct about this being the centennial, but in order to make sure we're correct, we fixed Wikipedia. I'm afraid I can't claim to have made that up. And just one more thing before I hand over the podium. I mentioned traditions earlier, and when you checked into the Hanover Inn this afternoon, you found a surprise waiting for you. I think
Yes,
you know
I
it's
did.
coming. So, does anyone have a playpen ball you'd like to give Randall? Any more? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Randall Munroe.
So, I don't wear a Tron costume, or a Guy Fawkes mask everywhere I go. I don't use numbers in place of letters in normal conversation. I didn't steal your credit card or hack into your mainframe, and no, I don't know what's wrong with your computer. Although I'd be happy to take a look. I have a blog. That's okay. There are many other people like me. We have moderated comment threads instead of one-way press conferences, and your parents' politicians wouldn't stand 10 seconds in them. I have friends from all across every time zone, different continents, and you know what? When we're in charge, I'm going to be a lot less likely to vote to bomb somewhere when I know the next morning I'm going to wake up to upset messages from them on Facebook. And you know what? When someone tries to lie to me, I look it up on Snopes. Wikipedia is more useful than Britannica, Jon Stewart is better than the network anchors, and the Perry Bible Fellowship could kick the ass of any of its peers in the papers. My name is Randall, and I'm from the internet.
What part?
Well, I grew up in a little town on LiveJournal, and I was actually on the first AOL Kids chat room in like 1993, I think, or 1994. Me too. Aw. It was, I think, Cool Treehouse was the first one, and then, and I know that because it was a much more innocent time, because I remember typing 9/F and 10, or 9/M and 10/M in response to ASL, which nowadays gets you in some trouble. But no, it's a real pleasure to be here. It is a little bit coming here. It's a little bit saddened by the shadow cast by the recent death of Michael Crichton, the man who taught me to be pathologically afraid of raptors that can open doors. And it's certainly sad, to have lost such a fabulous author, but I feel like there's some consolation in that maybe at some point during his writing career he was bitten by a mosquito, and maybe he's not gone forever. But no, the raptor thing, I mean, just one of the many neuroses I developed as a kid. That sort of, it's like OCD, except I swear I could stop if I wanted. Stepping on certain floor tiles or having to walk consistently with regards to where your stride falls on the cracks. There's no particular rule, you just have to be consistent. And things like when I'm walking around, I would decide that I could only turn when I was touching something. So if I wanted to get somewhere, I had to tack by hitting walls and bouncing in straight lines. But then sometimes I would turn these ordinary things into superpowers. Like, for a while, I've actually had this idea that it would be a handy superpower to be incredibly patient man. Just to have an inhuman amount of patience. And I've actually successfully bluffed with this. There have been a couple times when I needed to get something from a store, and they had just started to close, and it's right there in front of me, and I just want to pick it up, and they're like, nope, sorry, not going to sell it to you. And I'll say, but you're there. You've been, cleaning up the shop. You're going to be there another hour and a half. Can you just sell it to me? I walked this whole way. And nope, sorry, come back. And I'll be like, okay, well, when do you reopen? And he'll say like 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I'll be like, okay. And then keep standing there. And the guy says, 8 tomorrow morning, turns away. And this has worked a couple of times. Turns away and, starts sweeping, gets down the aisle, turns back around and sees me still standing there. Like, he'd say, is there a problem? And I'm like, oh, you said 8 o'clock, right? Look at the watch. And he just, because they can't believe that a normal mortal human So, and every time that's worked. They just stare for a moment and they're like, poor kid, hold on, okay, I'll go get it. But it's a lot of fun. It's always weird to come out and meet space and see this many people who actually read the comic. When I'm drawing it in my room, I can just pretend it's going on the internet, and then I'll get, comments on my blog, reviews. People will say nice things or mean things, but, it doesn't really matter. It's not real. But then I see all these people, and all of a sudden, uh-oh. But I don't know. It's the feedback is always interesting. Actually, sometimes I find the negative reviews, the negative comments about the comic more interesting. It's nice. I guess I don't get too many of them, which is nice. But when they do, at least sometimes they're creative. Actually, one of the comments that I got recently was, Randall Munroe is Joss Whedon, except he traded in his writing ability for the ability to memorize prime numbers. So that kind of hurt, but no, it's been, I guess the one place it has been a little weird. I try to keep my actual real personal life out of the strip and out of things. I don't talk about dating and stuff, and it's not even so much privacy for me as it makes things pretty weird for anyone I'm seeing. When, for example, I draw a comic about a nasty fight and breakup, and then the person I'm seeing starts getting calls from their friends that morning saying, oh God, I heard about it, is that okay? Are you okay? What happened? Did you really write over his boot sector? But the other place it's weird is in the actual, the process of dating when you're doing a comic like this, which the problem is I didn't really realize this, but everyone knows all my stories now. So we'll be dating, or we'll be like, go out on a walk down the beach or something like that, start talking. And we'll get the first 3 or 4 miles down, and we'll be talking, and I'll start to tell a story like, oh yeah, I always like to say that I like to take long walks on the beach, and but I mean really long walks, and she'll cut me off with like, I know, I read your comic. And then I'll get a story in return, and I won't know it. And it's even worse when it's sort of like romantic talk, like, oh, this is great. I just wish we could, slow down the world here for a moment. And, if we spun around, maybe we, and she'll be like, that's from your comic. How many other girls have you used that one on? But this is actually my fourth time in New Hampshire in the past maybe 120 hours. I got tired of shrieking on sites like Reddit about politics, and with the election getting closer, I was like, I need to figure out where I can go to get some work done on this, to get out the vote type stuff. So I came up to New Hampshire. I actually called up the Obama offices and said, is there anywhere, any offices, if you guys work and get out the vote, is there anywhere I could go to help out? Where do you need people in New Hampshire the most? Because I figure it's kind of a swing state. And they said, well, where are you coming from? And I was like, oh, I don't have a real job. I can go wherever. So they sent me up to Conway, where I worked for a couple of days. And first of all, your state does not need that many mountains. But it's been a lot of fun. We got a lot of interesting people asking questions about the race. The one that really stuck out in my mind, though, was the grizzled guy who showed up at the offices late at night when we had just finished calling people because it got too late, and this guy shows up, knocks on the door, sort of trench coat, completely indeterminate age, like 5-week shadow, and he just sort of comes in, and he's like, "What does your candidate think about guns?" And we were like, well, actually, neither of the candidates really are all that interested in gun control or the gun issue. We think there are more important things. They're working on healthcare and all this. And so he's like, I don't care about any of that. They're going to take my guns. And then I you start to get a little bit nervous at that point, because it's one of those issues where I feel like it's not so much there are a couple issues like this where it's not so much the issue, like they might be completely right. It's anyone who has. It's like there's been a lot of scientific controversy about race and IQ, and does it really exist? Are scientists do differences exist? Are scientists not talking about it? Or scientists talking about it? And it's not so much that one position there is right or being stamped down or anything like that. It's just anyone who's too interested in the issue frightens me. And I feel the same way when someone shows up who all they want to know about is guns and whether or not we agree with them about guns, and they're wearing the kind of coat that could conceal any number of guns. But it did strengthen my resolve to run for president in 2010, because those fuckers will never see that coming. I think I could win. I think that they really want to get out the youth vote. My platform would just be bring back the old Facebook. All right. Now, as I understand, there are microphones somewhere around here. If we want to start, if anyone has questions or topics they want to bring up, I usually find that's the most interesting part of these. So, sure. So anyone have any questions about XKCD, the internet, blogs?
A little while ago, you did a competition with the New Yorker, like a comic off or something. How did that come to be?
I actually just got the email, from the New York comic blog that just said, "Hey, we do this thing periodically. Do you want to contribute to it?" And I, looked at it and saw that they just done an interview with Michael Showalter, who I really like, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." And I looked at their drawings, and I was like, okay, I can do that. And he sent the topics. A couple days later, I got around to it and drew up a bunch of comics on his topics, sent them in. And then he wrote a narrative explaining how it was actually a duel, that I had met him in a supermarket, and there was all sorts of tension and tumbleweeds, and then slapping with a glove. But it was a lot of fun. I'm not really sure who won that one. I think both of us got a lot of attention from the other groups that hadn't heard of, the people who read XKCD and hadn't heard of The New Yorker, and the people who read The New Yorker who hadn't heard of anything that came out past 1970. But it was pretty neat. I've always liked the New Yorker's comic strips. Sometimes they could use a punchline, but that's just me. You know. So who else? Right in the middle. Right there. That works better. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. When you see this whole room filled with people who read your comic, when you're writing down a new comic, does it ever cross your mind, my God, like I control the opinions of like all these people in this age group. If I write about this, there might be like riots in the street or something. People might actually try to clone velociraptors. Does that ever cross your mind?
That's part of why, first of all, I try not to write about things that I really... I really like, so the first thing, of course, as I came into this room was I sized up and noticed, hey, all the doors shut, there are not a lot of large windows. The one that is up in the projection booth, I checked that beforehand and it's got a door that locks. But it occurs to me that when the raptor's in the room with you, that's kind of a liability. I think I'm okay up here, although they're astonishing jumpers. And I forget that there's anyone else in the room. It's just me and the raptor, making eye contact, staring, and then from the side. Clever girl. This is going to be a problem. Come on. Actually, that reminds me, anyone catch the news story just a few days ago about the woman who was bitten by the fox? And a jogger was... Look, I heard it from a friend of a friend who, you know, who made it up while they were reading Snopes. It's totally cool. Who was... she was bitten on the arm by a fox, or she was bitten on the leg and then the arm, and decided she should probably keep the fox so it could be tested for rabies, so left it clinging to her arm, teeth sunk in, and jogged for a mile to her car, where she ripped the fox off and then wrapped it in a t-shirt and threw it in her trunk, which is where that idea comes from. Or wrapped it in a sweater. But I think she gets in that category with the guy who cut his own arm off to get out of the rock slide as people who get free beer at any bar they go to. So, I think we had a question. Oh, yeah?
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Is the glass hole your alter ego?
When I started doing the comic, I was thinking like, oh, I should make a whole cast of characters, and then I was like, I don't know how to write characters, but then I was thinking like, okay, I'll have a romantic, one of the guys be the romantic guy and give him one name, and one of the guys be the nerdy guy and give him the other name. But then I was like, well, kind of the whole point of this is that they're like nerds have awkward fumbling sex too, and that needs, that is all one person, the nerdy guy and the whimsical guy and the so-and-so people. But then now and then there's something I just wanted to say that I just still wasn't quite comfortable with making, this character that everyone's supposed to identify with, there's just some joke I want to make. And so then I'll put the hat on the guy. So I decided I was willing to split that one off. And so yeah, that's my total asshole alter ego. And then it's been fun and it's sort of just developed into its own thing. So we had a question inconveniently in the very middle here. I think literally the middle of the room.
I already asked Nicole this on the other list, but I was wondering if you'd marry me.
Aw. The way she phrased it, I thought that you asked to marry her. Is this? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, so what you've got one rejection that way, and then. Well, there's a list. Yeah. Well, I feel like right now there's this chain, and so if I really want to complicate this further, Nicole. A honeymoon to the blogosphere. So, let's see, do we have, back up there.
So, if I may ask, what's going to happen with the relationship between the man in the hat and the girl who's a soulmate?
Oh, nothing good.
Oh, you can't?
I mean, they might turn out okay. Everyone around them, maybe not so much. Oh. Thank you.
What kind of pen is it?
The Faber-Castell Pitt pens. I actually use like the cheapest mechanical pencils that I've used ever since I was a kid, and then I got the Art Snob pens. And I don't know, I've gotten really used to them. It's really nice when you just draw and it's a single bold line. I draw all the comics on paper and scan them in. It's like the most low-tech operation for a tech comic, but I'm like one of the only comics people who still who still hand letters. I don't really have a good reason I do it. I just feel like there should be some work somewhere. All right. So, all the way over there?
I'm just curious if you have a favorite module in Python.
You see, they actually added anti-gravity to the trunk. So you can now import anti-gravity in whatever the latest Python is. So I'm partial to that one. I think the only thing it imports is a single function, which then I think it invokes the system browser and pulls up that comic. So that's got to be my favorite. Another over there? Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'll just.
You can project.
Work do you actually do? Well, not big, but popular website, and you've got this comic, but it goes up 3 times a week, and you've got your flag. But like, how much work is that actually? What do you do with that?
I do no less work than I did when I was at NASA. I mean, if you remember, there's what always stuck out, the line in Office Space when the guy's like, honestly, I do maybe 15 minutes of real work every day, and I was like, that guy's got it rough. Well, that was probably why I left. Was not just that comics were awesome, but I don't know if I'm cut out to be a C programmer. It was just making libraries work together. There's something fundamental about that just turned me off. So I would just spend a long time, I would load up a whole bunch of files, put them together, get a make file, put it in there, make, and then watch it scroll for a while. It gets to an error at the end, and then I'd sit there for about 15 minutes just sort of watching it, and then go and try, okay, let's change this file name, go, compile. It works. So then I'd go and make a change again, compile. Okay, it's broken again. And keep that up for a while, and they'd say, okay, here's the deadline. Then I'd take the one that worked, and you're like, okay, got it done. But no, I don't know. I never worked. I was actually a terrible student in high school, and then a much better student in college because I didn't have to stick to a schedule. So I would just, and this is, and I know for a lot of people this is not a good way to work, but it worked for me, which is when I had an assignment, I'd get pretty good at figuring out, okay, how much time is this going to take? Say I've got an assignment that's going to take, 6 hours and 6.5 hours is my guess, and it's due at 8 o'clock. So I started at 1:30, and I did that for all of college. And sometimes it meant, okay, I've got a whole bunch of things coming in this week, and that means that I just don't sleep for that week. But there was never any trying to convince myself to work, because it's just you hit the point where you have to do it, and then you do it. So, and I basically do comics the same way, is that I don't have any ideas until there's a thing on the site being like, you have to put up a comic now, and then suddenly I'll be going through my notebooks and be like, oh, this one isn't that terrible. I can use that. So it's just a constant, it sort of feels like a constant flow of the least bad of the comics I've been doing, the things I've been drawing. In the yellow?
Were you more likely to believe that the moon landing was a hoax before or after working with NASA?
Well, it was really, I had my suspicions all along, but when I started working there and they actually showed me the shots of the soundstage they had built on Mars.
One night at just about 12 o'clock, I went to look at your comic and I ran into something that wasn't actually the comic, it was a different page that linked to it.
What address did you type in?
It was similar, but it was a different
I mean, because if you're like me, when you go to the address bar, no matter what page you're on.
before the next one was put up.
That's weird. I think we've got it ordered so that it creates the new page, and then it updates the links, and then it updates the index. But I don't know. That's pretty strange. Are you using Google Chrome? Because as of this morning, for some reason, Google Chrome won't, or as of sometime in the last couple of days, I just started hearing about it today. But yeah, Google Chrome doesn't pick up the CSS file like all the other browsers do. Damn it. No, actually, if you look at the Google Chrome source tree, they include all of CYG Win and they've got some huge set of packages, 3 web servers in there, and the entire Python source tree, I think. Including the anti-gravity. So presumably, including anti-gravity, so that can't be the problem. All right, in the white?
I was wondering if you ever tried a Fourier transform on a raptor.
No, they move fast. You need the Laplace at the very least. But
Well, how about a fast Fourier transform?
damn it, that was the joke I should have gone for. Good thinking. You get to draw the next comic. Yeah.
Were you ever contacted by anyone at YouTube with regards to the audio preview of the comment?
No, that showed up in some beta thing. So I wrote a comic about how YouTube should add this feature where you have to listen to the things you write. And it's an absolutely terrible idea, because if you can't get the voice actors to read it in a dramatic voice, then it's not the same. But someone apparently took it seriously and implemented it. And no, it just showed up in some of their released code. It was as a function that wasn't used, and then shortly after, it started appearing on the pages. No one from YouTube has ever contacted me about it. But I did hear from a friend who's got a friend working there, in Igor or something, who apparently saw the comic and thought it would be a cool project and stuck it in there. But as I mentioned on the blog, and in general, I mean, the speech synthesized comments, it doesn't work but so well. It's hard to get across, and you don't have to click the button to get it to read the thing to you. So you can just post crap anyway. But I put this up on the blog. The most heartening thing about it was that I went and looked at what people were saying about the feature, and someone had posted a comment saying, "This is the dumb," no one knew why, and someone was like, "This is the dumbest feature I've ever seen. It has no conceivable use. Why would you put this sort of stupid something in here?" And then, P.S. And the audio preview of my own comment sounded moronic. So maybe there's hope. All right, back up there. I've always been like tempted, but I also know that it would be like, my friends, we have like way too many inside jokes, and when that starts, it doesn't stop, and then you just keep doing jokes that you're like, oh, me and my friends think this is hilarious, but you forget that like the 99.99% of the people who have read it who have never met you don't know what you're talking about. What I actually do want to do, I was thinking about this, of just doing an inside joke magazine, where the entire thing would just be inside jokes collected. And, you know, it would have some hilarious name, you know, the plaster microwave, and then it would be like, what'd that mean? You're like, oh, you had to be there. So I always thought that'd be fun. I put a few sort of hidden messages in it. Things like when there were music notes floating above the stage in one of the comics to show music going by. I actually had a friend of mine arrange a lounge piano piece of Never Gonna Give You Up. And what really made me happy about that was the thought that someone might, you know, read the comic, you know, look at the joke. The music didn't really have anything to do with the joke. It was just, there just needed to be music there. And look at it and be like, oh, that looks like an actual piano score, you know, and have the wheelie chair wheel over to the piano, like, look back at it, okay. Dun, 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 okay. Dun, 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 and there are a couple little things like in the binary heart, there was, you know, the binary actually means something, and then there was a secondary message embedded in that was because I was getting over a girl at the time. And, yeah, things like that. So yeah, I fit in secret messages like that, but I always have to keep it like very much not make it the joke. You know, it's the same way with the alt text. I know that everyone who's, you know, a hardcore XKCD reader with friends who read it, all, you know, people know that there's mouse over text on the image, but I figure most readers still probably don't. If you put your mouse over the comic, the tooltip appears and there's a little extra joke. And so I make a point of I only write the joke once I have finished the comic and scanned it in. The mouse over text is never essential to getting it. So there's that. I don't know. I worry about a lot of that kind of stuff, and I think that's part of why it's worked is making sure that the person who's stumbling on it, who doesn't have any other connection to anything that you do, can, or you know, to any of your friends or anything like that, can get it. So let's see. Is there a question over there? Yeah.
Do you ever get writer's block? And if you do, what happens?
For most of I think late 2006. No. I think it's pretty much. It's like I said, I just take I'll have like throughout the day, I have these little notebooks where because a lot of it is just everyone notices, you know, stuff that makes you laugh and you just have to remember, like, write it down and then try to sharpen it and make it, you know, more and more pointed. And I mean, so I'll fill notebooks with little comments or ideas for things, and then when it comes time to do the comic, I just sort of scan through and like find something that works in there. And, you know, sometimes I'm less happy with it than other times, but I know that if I don't do one every day, or every update day, if I ever start to get lax with the schedule, the pressure would be off completely, and then I wouldn't, you know, I'd do like one comic a month and turn into Mega Tokyo or something. But I mean, in general, it's the fact that so many people are listening and talking about things, and now, you know, and that I'm now a lot more involved in this whole, you know, tech world and science world, and there's just a lot of fun stuff going on. So I can always just sort of take something I'm thinking about and then just write dialogue about it or write comments about it until I hit something, you know, like even if it's just a terrible pun that works. But I don't know. I wonder a whole lot because I read. It's only in retrospect that I realized I was actually preparing for this job. Because as a kid, I did nothing but, you know, I did math and science, and I read newspaper comics like Calvin and Hobbes and everything. And I would just check out stacks. I read everything in all the humor sections of the library. I was like, why would you ever stop reading humor? Why would you ever spend any time not reading funny things? Because it's fun, you know, it's funny and it's fun to laugh. I mean, I remember the librarian actually having a talk with my mom about it, being like, I think he's reading a little too much humor. And she's like, and I remember my mom said, she talked to the librarian, and she's like, well, no, I mean, I know he reads science fiction stuff. I know he reads Isaac Asimov. And she was like, oh, yeah, he checked out an Asimov book earlier. It was Asimov's Treasury of Humor. But I actually don't remember where that started. But anyway, but I've been reading. Yeah. Yeah, and no, I've lost it. I'm sorry. We're just gonna have to stop. I'll come back tomorrow with the rest of the the discussion. Yes.
Are you aware that carrying wholesale like that gives you a +2 to wisdom?
Also, like probably +3 to hipster. So I don't know. Yeah?
Would you ever be interested in owning a hot air balloon yourself?
That would actually be kind of cool. I don't know. What I've been doing lately is doing high altitude kites. I mean, I've been doing this on and off, but I just got a camera reprogrammed so that I could actually fly kites with a camera hanging on it that would take pictures for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And I can send the kites up to a few thousand feet at least and get pictures of a town, cities, stuff like that. But I was thinking that a balloon would be the next step. I actually talked with someone here who's doing cool balloon research, and I was thinking if I could get a hold of a large hot air balloon, I could send up cameras up to absolutely ridiculous heights. And the next step is obviously you build a ladder to it and climb up to it. Yeah. I think it might be more practical to do the cluster ballooning where you get a whole bunch of the balloons they use to hold up banners at sale places that are about yay big, and you just get a whole bunch of them, and you get a lawn chair underneath, and then you float away, and then it becomes an artsy movie. But yeah. Oh, cool. You can do that again. Oh, really?
Yeah, he eventually died.
Oh, okay, cool. But did he have cellular connectivity up there? Because I could at least be the first person to blog. Oh, really? Wait. Oh dear. Yes?
So some of your ideas have in the comics have come true in real life. I'm wondering what's your favorite of those, and what's your favorite idea that hasn't come true in real life that you wish it would?
I'm still waiting for someone to put Janine Garofalo on a space station and then have it crash, and have her jumping the motorcycle off of the space station with a tranquilizer dart gun, which she needs because she's going toward the volcano and there's a Tyrannosaurus waiting for her. I sort of did that one because everyone kept on acting out the comics, and I was like, whoa, this is going to get out of hand fast. I better set a really high standard, I better just take this to its conclusion quick, I don't know, one of my favorite ones is when I drew Cory Doctorow with the cape and goggles and had never, I had never met him or anything, and then, he sort of took it to heart and has been wearing them at events. And it's, I don't know, I have such a combined, affection and amusement for the whole blogosphere, and, he almost exemplifies that best, as one of the major bloggers that. And I'm really glad he took it with good humor because he's now getting that constantly. Stallman, by contrast, had, when he was sent samurai swords after I drew a comic about that, he had no idea what anyone was, any of this was about. And he sent back a very nice note saying, okay, they've explained to me that this is from this comic, and I'm not sure what to do with this sword, but I guess I'll keep it by my bed. He was later actually attacked by ninjas at an event. Up there. Who? Yes. Who waved your hand? Oh, okay, up there. Sorry, I didn't see who had started to talk. Yes, Tim? I don't know. I'm kind of like when I go back over them, I'm always self-critical, so I tend not to read through the archives much. I know a lot of comic people don't do that as much. But I know I guess in the last, 100 or so, what's interesting about it is that like which ones are my favorite is totally influenced by how much people like them. Which on one hand is sort of not how the art's supposed to be, but on the other hand, like if you're a comedian and you tell a joke and no one in the audience laughs, you pretty much told it wrong. Maybe you're talking to the wrong audience, but most likely the joke is not as good as you thought. But on the other hand, sometimes it catches me by surprise when I draw one, and like when I come up with an idea, but I've been thinking about it for so long that I'm not really sure about it anymore, whether or not it's funny or not, or whether people will get what I was thinking or what, and then I get feedback that's really good, like it totally catches me by surprise. Then that's really cool. One case where that happened was like one of my early most famous comics was the one that circulated around the most was the pseudo make me a sandwich one. And believe it or not, I thought that comic was like, I was almost thinking of it as like filler after the other one I had done, because I was like, well, most people aren't going to know what pseudo is. And then the ones who do have probably all encountered this before and all made this joke, and they're just going to be like, oh yeah, that. And boy, did that catch me by surprise. That the readership doubled after I did that comic. So. And also, suddenly my readership was nitpicking any computer remark I made a lot more. One that I got a lot of feedback about that I was also, before I did it, really happy with was the part 2 of the journal series, where the guy gets his hat knocked off by the girl. I remember, I came up with that, and I was just like, oh man, I really like how this works. I drew it out. I was really satisfied with it, and I remember just putting it up and being like, oh man, I hope people like this. I hope people like, and they did, and that was exciting. But I don't know. Then we're just getting into, I don't know. I could talk all day about things that I've done that I liked, but let's see. There.
Some of your favorite comics?
Oh man. Well, one that's sadly ended not that long ago was the Perry Bible Fellowship, of course. That one is like he was like the undisputed king of gags, or king of just building up something and then delivering it, and you had no idea where he was going, and then suddenly the last panel would completely change everything around. So he's incredible. I think that since he's stopped working, I think my favorite like gag writer in comics is probably Zach Wiener of Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal. That's one that's been he's been around for a long time, but it's recently really been taking off. And he's just so consistently punchy and good. And I always feel like sometimes the comics that I feel the best about, I realize are just approaching closer and closer to executed like one of his. So there's also stuff like A Softer World that's a more obscure sort of demented photo comic written by a wonderful, completely crazy dude named Joey Camo, who and then one of his friends, Ryan, also does dinosaur comics, which is just an amazing achievement. Let's see, and then everyone seems to read Penny Arcade, even the people who aren't so much gamers. I mean, I still read it even though I don't get about half of them, because the half I do get are just so superbly executed, because they've just been doing this, so intently now for a number of years, and they've just got it down. And then the really obscure one that I always give a shout out to is Buttercup Festival, which really inspired some of my early comics that people liked, and I kept on pointing people back to it, mostly to no avail, because it's really hard to read that guy's handwriting. But it's this really whimsical comic where characters will just suddenly, in the middle of a sentence, drift off and float off over the mountains nearby, and there's something about that I really like. Yeah. Let's see.
So, of course, most of your fans at an undergraduate institution are undergraduates and therefore younger than you are. And since they are fans of yours, they are also by definition nerdy. And anyone who takes that, as an offensive remark needs to...
I don't think they're in here.
Anyway.
Well, they might say, "Excuse me, I'm not a nerd, I'm a geek," and then there'll be like a 10-minute slideshow on of which is which. And 5 minutes into the slideshow, you're like, by virtue of this, you have proved yourself irrevocably both. But anyway, you were saying.
Given the remark you made earlier that you sort of unknowingly prepared yourself your whole life for this job.
Yeah.
It sounds like this job is something that really makes you happy and something that is fulfilling for you. And I guess I'm just curious, because I think it's safe to say that you are at least one of a nerd or a geek. What advice might you have for other folks who are similar to you who want to find a potentially non-traditional job or at least a fulfilling job?
I think there's a couple things here that took a while, that take people a while to figure out, but like you'll see a lot of people writing about their career work, people who've been really successful, and there's a theme that emerges. One of them is that and one of them is something that Steve Jobs talks about, which is that you cannot connect the dots except in hindsight. That basically there's almost no such thing as career planning. And the example that Steve Jobs would always give is that he dropped out of school and then continued attending classes for a while, and he would just attend whatever classes seemed interesting to him. And one of them he would go to was a calligraphy class that he thought, this is cool, I'll learn calligraphy. And there is no way that anyone looking at what he was doing there could have said that that was in any way useful to anything he would be doing, because he was pretty clearly working on microprocessors and the basics of operating systems and stuff. But he spent a lot of time learning calligraphy. And then, so a couple of years later, as they're putting together this OS, and they're working on font rendering text, as I understand, Steve Jobs he really pushed. He said, you know what, we need variable width fonts because that's really kerning and these things are really important. And he did, and Mac. So Apple became one of the first companies doing machines that did good text display like that. That did where you could do a lot of the typesetting that you couldn't do on the fixed width PCs. And because of that, Apple had a head start in the graphics market, and now they're the dominant machine for any kind of graphics design. And you can really trace it back to Steve Jobs had a random interest in calligraphy that he pursued. So the lesson there, I think, is just you do whatever seems interesting to you, but you do it like hard and get something done. And if nothing comes of it, you get something finished and then you move on to another thing, and then maybe later you'll be able to fit it together. But I think the key is really just keep doing stuff. The other side of that is the other key element, I think, is something that I'm learning from doing application essays for things, which I did a lot of up until the current job where there are no standards. I mean, certainly if they let me in. I found that writing an interesting or unusual application essay in nearly every situation is good. That you will most always err on the side of being too conservative and too stuffy or too whatever. An example of this is the first job I got at NASA. It was an internship that was really, it was kind of like prestigious and had like all sorts of qualified people applying for it. And I was just an undergraduate who had never done anything in the field. And so I did the application essay. And it was one of those ones, and any of you who are undergraduates and are going on to any kind of a program, you're going to get this question on essays like 80 million times. The application was 10 short answer questions and an essay, and every single short answer question was some variation on, why are you a good fit for this program? Or, what is it about this program that you think that will make you bring something to the program? What is it that you think that this program will bring to you and help you grow and thus contribute more to the program? And I filled in 10 of these, and then I got to the essay prompt, which was, explain something about yourself that shows why you're a good fit for this program. And so, and I had just gotten really frustrated at that point, and so I wrote a story about submarines instead. And it was, and if you read into it, it did tell, a little bit about me. It was about how when I was a kid, I would go snorkeling and play with these little model submarines, and I was always scared of the deep water. But I tried to write it in like really flowery style, like, a child's fear of the deep and the dark, and so on. And it was just, and so I wrote this essay, and it had almost nothing to do with the prompt. And I turned it in, and it was only after that I found out how many other people from other schools had applied for this thing and how serious, it was. And I was like, oh crap, there's no way I'm getting into this. And I got accepted, which was a huge surprise. And so I went and talked to them, and I'm like, I know I didn't have the grades or anything like this. What was it? Why? And I haven't worked on this. I'm not a good student. Why'd you let me in? And they were like, actually, we looked at the people in the admissions thing really liked the essay. So, and you got to realize these people are just so sick to death of reading these things over and over and over that you're, especially with things that are a little bit difficult to get into, you're often better off taking a chance. My brother's currently applying to a program where they've got he's doing a quiz that has a lot of really interesting questions on it. One that stuck out was, if you could be any kind of a tree, you would be a sequoia. Why? And it was actually my cousin who figured out the obvious answer to that, which is, that's the question I've been asking myself for the last 700 years. So, yes?
What are your thoughts on the singularity and your role in society after it happened?
I think there's this idea that technology is inevitably, everything is accelerating, everything is going faster, every graph looks like a hockey stick, and there's going to be this point where everything just goes too fast for human minds, computers take over, and we're all, reduced to people floating in pink goo powering batteries or something. And I'm mainly skeptical because I think that the people who write about that kind of thing are not the people who actually look at the forefront of technology and realize that these are all bloggers. And somehow I have trouble seeing. It seems like the direction that the interesting things inside, the interesting things that are happening are not yet in like AIs taking things over, and much more in people getting connected in weird ways, and computers aiding the same kind of social stuff that we were doing already. So it's not that I keep up with my friends any faster so much. I still, I'll have days where I don't necessarily do anything. I just talk to people a little bit, but it's all through these bizarre media. But I don't think it really changes anything about us, and I don't think that the world necessarily leaves us behind, because the world is us. I think technology just shifts roles around us constantly. So I don't really hold with the singularity thing. But I mean, if it does happen, I expect to see Cory Doctorow riding the cybernetic horse at the front of it. All right, up here.
My name is Parker Payne, and I'm starting I have a microphone. This is awesome. I can hear my own voice. It's weird.
Bring it up here, and we'll try to do feedback. Yeah. Go.
I'll just talk normally. I'm starting a Students for Free Culture chapter on campus, and one of the issues we deal with is DRM. Mm-hmm. And I know you had a comic about that a few weeks ago.
You read it?
Yes.
No, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, right. And I know you also talk about Cory Doctorow and RMS. And so I'm wondering if you consider yourself to be an activist, and if you see the strip moving in a direction where it'll involve more advocacy in the future?
No, because I think I have a really hard time being preachy and funny at the same time. It's pretty much one or the other, because I notice every now and then I'll just start the comic and I'll realize it's turning into a screed. And anytime there's like this screed trigger that trips, and then I'm like, wait, I need to back off of this for a second and make it sound more absurd. So I think like the role of humor is generally like making things absurd, like things that are absurd, making them more absurd, or pointing out that they're kind of silly. And that I feel like I can do, especially in that area, because there are so many silly things. But I don't know. I really have to work hard, like, not to take myself too seriously and the comic too seriously, because it's easy to do that when everyone's always writing into you and being like, it's awesome, it's really important, all this stuff. And I think it's hard to do that and be funny at the same time. And so if it's one or the other, I go with being funny. Sometimes it's neither, but unfortunately, I sort of view the calling of making really lame jokes as ultimately a higher calling than any sort of social activism. Up there? Yeah.
Ninjas or pirates?
I feel like lately zombies have really taken off. I mean, as someone who grew up on Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles, it's really hard not to, kind of get behind the ninjas on that one. But on the other hand, the pirates have the hooks. That's pretty. I just sort of avoid a stand on either of them. I don't think that either of them are really well equipped to deal with raptors, so it's not really of interest to me. Also, smoke bombs don't work nearly as well as they're supposed to. Yes?
Yeah, so basically you were talking about like technology stuff speeding up and stuff like that. And if you were given like the capacity to invent any one thing, like anything, what would that be?
There's an open-ended question. So I've just been watching the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I pretty much want to build the Summer Glau bodyguard. I don't know, that show has its ups and downs, but it's consistently fun to watch Summer Glau punch people through walls.
Did you actually try the smoke bomb and window escape?
I have played with smoke bombs, and they're a lot of fun. I hadn't tried the awkward escape, although I did, not too long after that, have a friend say, we need to talk about the feelings. And I'm like, this is really a smoke bomb moment. And they were like, I understand, we'll do this later. I was like, okay, and we just walked away. But no, a friend of mine was talking about how she knew someone who would actually do the whole smoke bomb pantomime, including like the awkward backing away, and like the taking it out, lighting it, dropping it, and then like quietly backing away and then running out the door. And she said it got a little bit more awkward every time. Yes?
I guess my question is, I feel like a lot of your jokes fall into two categories. One where it's the CS, the math, and the physics jokes, and then on the other side it's sort of the Web 2.0, like digs, sort of making fun of Ron Paul or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I guess I was wondering, do you think that the comic has changed as your readership has grown and maybe gone a little bit more mainstream? I don't know. I was kind of interested in that.
Yeah. I don't know. A lot of the time I find that my impression of what's happened to the comic is not actually, like, it's sort of skewed. Like, I'll go and someone was like, you stop using color, or use color all the time now, or one of those. And like, then I went, and I was like, yeah, I think I do. And then I went and did a survey and found that I had like used exactly the same proportion of color strips versus none, and like throughout the whole time I did the survey. But about that, I don't know. I mean, I've certainly gotten more involved in a lot of the stuff that's really taken off as I've been doing the comic. Stuff like, I first discovered Reddit as they were linking to me and started hanging out there, other sites like that. And so that's definitely been a focus in a way that it wasn't before because I wasn't involved in it. So there's definitely been that. So that's definitely taken it over some. But I don't know, whenever I've been on one topic for a while, I think, okay, I want to do something about this, or I get tired of it and move on. So I feel like there's sort of a permanent, jumping back and forth. And maybe I'll hang out in one of the sections longer than usual, but ultimately I try to keep, something for everyone. Let's see, and girl in the center.
Did you have a short schedule last week? I accidentally attempted the 20 hours a week.
Huh?
I saw it in the library around day 3. So I was wondering if anything, to your knowledge, anyone's ever completed the whole 60.
Yeah, I've gotten, on the 28-hour day, I've done a week and a half. And there's a website run by a guy whose family all lives on it. I discovered after doing the comic, but I really don't, I don't think it's for mortals. There was a guy who I talked to who had done a Mars project where he was living on a Martian day for studying something or other, and like after he was just doing it for a year, staying up all night in well-lit rooms, dark, and something about it the rhythms being off. He actually started just hallucinating and getting weirded out after like doing that for about a year. And that's only like a 45 or 48 minute difference. So it can definitely throw you off after a while. I know that while doing, for example, the canvassing, I ended up doing, one of those 64-hour days, followed by one of those 24 hours sleeping, followed by, no schedule at all. So that's much more common. But yeah, you generally hit the point where you're in the middle of the day and feeling really tired, and but you're supposed to be awake until late that night, and you don't want to, and that's usually where I'm doomed. On the other hand, don't you have some sort of requirement that you're supposed to pass out in one of the libraries, sleep in one of the libraries? Someone was explaining to me about this list. Yeah, tower room. Take a nap? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Huh?
Can't sleep for labs.
Unless you know the studies.
Unless you're continuing to work. Yes?
How much time do you actually spend on Reddit?
God. I for a while I had it blocked in my host's file. So whenever I went there, it would redirect me to xkcd.com/no. Which is just, is it Christmas? It's just a mirror of isitchristmas.com, except it also says no on Christmas. And that actually, that was when it really surprised me, because I was like, it seemed like hiding the cigarettes from yourself. Like, you know where they, you know that you've just blocked yourself. You could unblock yourself if you wanted. You should just be able to decide not to go there. So I set that, but I felt kind of silly doing it. And then I was amazed at like 6 times in the hour after I had said it, I found myself staring at the no and being completely startled. Like I would just be like, okay, I'm typing to someone, and then no. Oh man, I just flipped over and typed CNN or Reddit or whatever. Wow. So, I don't know, a fair bit of time. I change names constantly though. Which I guess no one knew up until now. I try to post under, I change my names every so often instead of posting under the XKCD name, just because then people will tell you when your jokes are stupid. It feels like I'm getting more honest feedback, when I'm being anonymous, which is a cool thing about the internet, which is also a cool thing about real life, which is other than that in general, people don't know what I look like, which means that on the street, like if I ever start to be like, oh man, it's the internet, I'm cool, then I can just go out on the street and like, no one knows who I am. So that's, that's healthy. Of course, now you all know what I look like, which means probably no one will leave this room. No, I always think that when people ask about the raptors thing, and I always I've sized up the room, but the really important thing is here that raptors are fast, but I assume they can only kill so many people, kill and eat so many people, per minute or whatever. So it's like the old joke, that I don't actually have to outrun the raptors, I just have to outrun one of you. So. But the window's over there. No, right. Well, and they'll get those two, and then the ones come from the sides, and then there's the other one in the helicopter with the sniper rifle. That's going to be in Jurassic Park 4. And up there, we got a few more questions.
You were saying not so long ago that you don't exactly have an official job. What was your family/parents' reaction to that?
The main question was like, do you need to move back in? No, then it's fine. Like as long as I'm at least paying rent, they're pretty open to that. At first, I remember my mom was kind of nervous at first, like you're leaving a job at NASA to draw pictures. But then she realized, when she started noticing that like people, in the tech community are reading it, if I ever, want to work on a project and, want to send out a resume or something, it opened up a lot of avenues. So my family was actually, pretty cheerful about it once they sort of figured out what it was all about. It was definitely a weird moment, but on the other hand, I was really ready to leave the office space-ish environment. So even if it did mean just sort of coasting for a while, I was okay with it. It wasn't too scary a transition.
I was just wondering what the deal is with the flying ferret. Did you?
That was one of those random stories. My brother had a ferret that he would hold. There's a point in the comic where the guy holds the ferret sort of by the scruff of the neck, and it's just dangling there looking at him. And my brother had a ferret, and he would always walk around with it, and he loved it dearly, and would hold it like that and played with it. And so I incorporated that into the comic, and then at some point, I think I was just drawing ferrets, and I drew one of them with the wings, and I liked the idea, and then I just did a couple comics with it, but that did come out of a real ferret that died not too long ago. But but which was adorable, and that I have many memories of waking up to the ferret being dropped on my face while I slept, which definitely hastened my decision to move out. but that is where that was a real ferret. They really smell. Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Horrible. Sing along. I was wondering if you've made a supervillain evil league with evil submission, and if you haven't, what would it be?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of what particular guys. I don't know. I think that I could maybe channel my talents. I think we need an entropy villain. He just everywhere he goes, things start to decay. Processes speed up. Things become disorganized. Things accelerate. Oh, true. That's one of the most frustrating vocabulary distinctions is whether entropy which one entropy means in the information theory context. And I keep on running into, a place where I have this number going up and it's entropy going up or it's going down, or does that mean there's more information or more disorder or what? But no, I like this idea, especially because you could have the villain be one of the obsessive organizers and the bad guy just be entropy man, and so he'd walk into the room and things on the desk would the colored pencils would start to flip out of order, and then the hero would go and rearrange them, and then the entropy man would just stand there, and then you'd see all of the cabinets open and the paper would come out and then start reshuffling, and then entropy man goes faster, and works, and the only guy who watches through to the end of this movie is incredibly patient man. All right, we can do, does anyone, I actually can't see a clock from here, how we are on time. All right, so we'll do a couple more.
How's your campaign for presidency of the internet?
I took a look at the internet and realized, I sort of wrote that into the Black Hat comic is, wait a minute, I don't want to be in charge of this. Because no matter how evil you tried to be, you would end up taking internet arguments seriously, and that's just not a good road to go down, because then it's a year later, you're drunk on the alleys of Slashdot arguing with internet trolls about Natalie Portman, and it's a bad place to be. I've seen that happen to people. It's not pleasant. So, let's see. In that.
Because it needs to happen.
Thank you. I have trouble finding hats in my size since I think I've measured once and it's on the upper end of head circumference. So I really need to find somewhere that'll do a black hat of the kind in the comic that will fit me. Conway? Farmway? Farmway.
It's a store.
Okay. I was just going to see how long we keep exchanging that word. Cool. Yeah, I was actually not a huge hat person before that, before the comic, but then I kept drawing in there, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I should do that. So yeah, I think I'd like to see it come back. I don't know. I think that we had, cause I think Kennedy made history in the inauguration when he didn't wear a hat to it. I think he was the first president not to wear a hat to the inauguration, and then hatlessness became a trend. And I'd really like to see this upcoming inauguration maybe bring it back, of the first president to be inaugurated with a hat. And I could really see Obama in. There are some pictures of him in the cowboy sheriff's hat, sort of here to clean up these parts. I think he could try to make that work. And then anyone who's a huge Mel Brooks fan appreciates that image that's been floating around of Obama in the sheriff's hat with the caption, "It worked in Blazing Saddles." There's a couple references tied up in there. But yeah, overall, hats, I'm a fan. Hair is a pain, so that's easy enough. What's a question up in the back?
Where did the Attack of the Spiders comic come from? Or the series of comics?
That started as something I'm drawing. It's going to finish. I've been waiting until all the people who remember the original strips are long gone, and then I'll do the conclusion, and it'll just confuse the hell out of everyone. But the thing is, the longer I have it sitting around, the more I've been, like, the longer I have, like, the sketch of, like, here's, I think, what the last strip, last two strips are going to be, the more, like, epic it gets. So at this point, I feel like I really need to get it to make it worth this wait. So, which makes me, take longer on it, which makes it needs to be better and better. And so I expect I'll be like, the Marmaduke guy at 80 churning out XKCD, and then I'll die, and they'll come in and they'll find, like, a room in my house that no one knew about, and they'll go in, and there'll just be walls and walls of red spider drawings, and everything's crossed out, and paper's thrown up on the floor, and, like, one wall is a mural, and everything's connected by yarn, and then they'll keep on releasing posthumous XKCD collections of his unreleased notes from this, and it'll just get worse and worse and worse. But again and again, and that seems to be the way things go. Yes?
Could you give us a summary of your perfect treehouse?
Oh, man. There would be a component suspended from a balloon. Like, it would go up above the tree. Everything. So, from what I recall, I don't have my notes here with me, but I think I've got, out of all of the numerical mentions of raptor physiological attributes in Jurassic Park, I remember they were able to do jumps of 8 to 12 feet vertically in The Lost World in the book. And I think they had the high hide, which was about 18 or 20 feet off the ground, but the raptors were able to jump up and get to the lower bar of it when they took running jumps. So definitely 22, 23 feet at a very minimum would be the first part of the treehouse that you could get a grip on. And then from there on, it's basically the Swiss Family Robinson. Except those tigers were nothing. I mean, yes?
What's the line that you draw at, like, where you let the popular XKCD take it? Like, say somebody comes up to you and says, "We'll give you a primetime slot for an XKCD animated TV series on Fox." Would you do that?
First of all, I don't know anything about animation. I figure all the stick figure animation that needs to be done, Don Hertzfeld already did with Rejected. But no, it's like I said. I'm actually, I'm a huge fan of newspaper comics and that medium, and gag comics, Far Side type stuff. But I really don't know a lot about animation and about movies and telling jokes that way. So I wouldn't know the first thing about what to do with it. And of course, then there's the artistic integrity. So what it really comes down to is how much money are they offering. But yes.
And what would it be about?
Yes, and you'll see. And
who's that girl in your 11th grade Spanish class?
I really don't know. I'm worried that I'll get a call from her and be like, "You were staring at me, drawing me?" Yeah, one of the very early comics, this was before I made it a webcomic, I was just storing a bunch of drawings I had done online, and one of them was this girl lying in front of me in Spanish class, and I was watching a really boring movie, and she had fallen asleep, and I just sort of was sketching and drew her and the floor around her or something like that, and she was watching the movie or something, and it was in my notebook, and when I was scanning things to save, I was like, oh, I kind of like that, and I scanned it and saved it. It ended up in the webcomic, and ever since then I've been wondering if she's going to notice that I was at her school and then look at that one and be like, he drew my ass. He was staring at me and get really creeped out. So I don't know. I mean, I should have really said it was a different class just to have plausible deniability, but I didn't. Yeah, so no idea. All right, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. We'll do. Right here?
When is someone going to kill us all?
Kill us all?
When is it going to destroy the planet?
When is what going to?
The LHC.
Oh, the LHC. Well, I think they're getting it up to the appropriate speed sometime late next year. Yeah, and then it's just a matter of how quickly the strangelets spread. But I think that really what they need, we really need to accelerate work on the LHC if we want to beat out global warming as a way to destroy the Earth. I think there's no excuse for this laziness. I think there's all this debate about the debate over how much of it, what's man-made, how much it's man-made, how much of the damage being done to the planet is man-made, and I think we could shoot for at very least a higher percentage. I think the LHC gives us a great shot at that. Like, you thought carbon was bad. So yes, I definitely have high hopes for the scientific advances that will be permitted. Also, it'll be hilarious if it completely screws over string theorists. And the problem is they'll just be like, well, we have one of the other 10 to the 15th theories that... So I'm afraid at that point we just have to use super soakers to subdue them. All right, we can do one more question up there.
Have you ever been approached for newspaper or magazine syndication, and would you date it if someone offered it to you?
I don't know. I feel like the newspapers, like newspaper syndication is really kind of a raw deal compared to doing a webcomic. You don't get the rights to your stuff. Bill Watterson helped a lot with that, for fighting for that. But ultimately, other people are in control of the creation, where it's published, what you're allowed to say, what sort of jokes you can do. You have to appeal to everyone who reads a newspaper instead of like the 2% of crazy nerdy people. And it's like with music labels. Most of the profit goes to the syndicates and the middle people. So really, what I do is when I'm asked about that, I feel almost obliged to say no, I'm not interested in that, nor being transmitted by telegraph either, and then leap onto my motorcycle and spin around and throw dust in their face and ride off into the blogosphere. Yeah, they've actually run them in a couple of places. Mostly it's a matter of like since I don't do them ahead of time, I'm not able to get them strips ahead of time, and we don't have a facility for getting them high-res printable versions, so they have to run them kind of small, which I never thought was a problem because it seems like they already run comics way too small anyway. But most of the time, though, people who want to, I feel like most people who want to read it just read it on the computer and don't, that isn't a huge, that's where most webcomics are. And most of the comics that people are reading now are online, and they have a print presence, but people who discover them will then go, like someone who doesn't have an internet connection and doesn't work with the internet much, doesn't work with computers much, I feel like isn't going to be getting a lot out of XKCD period anyway. But I've done that now and then. I just don't see it as there being a huge demand there. All right, we'll do one more up there.
How many computational linguists does it take to change a light bulb?
What exactly do you mean by that question? I think ultimately, I think that the light bulb is, whether or not it is a construct of language, is a question that will be addressed in my future papers on this subject. And hopefully by the end of it, I'll have developed a framework in which we can examine the concepts entailed in your uses of the words change and light bulb, determine whether or not it's the light bulb that is changed or whether it is truly us. This paper, that's the abstract of my submission. All right. So, thank you very much.
So, are you sincere about the marriage proposal? All right, I'd like to thank Randall again for coming to visit.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
A few quick words before you leave. The event is not quite over yet. We are going to have a party in Collis Common Ground thanks to the help of Creative Gaming Club and the club with most of the t-shirts. So that will start at 8, as I said, Collis Common Ground, 8 o'clock to whenever you feel like leaving, up until 1 in the morning. So we're going to have XKCD-themed movies, XKCD-themed video games and other games, an XKCD-themed costume contest with prizes from the XKCD store, autographs from the creator of XKCD, and dessert EBAs themed.
So, that raptor stole my shirt.
Let's all thank Nicole for making this happen.
You're welcome. And also, tomorrow we're going geohashing. So if anyone is unfamiliar with geohashing, I suggest you do what we all do, look it up on the internet. Make a long story short, on Saturday afternoons, a whole bunch of XKCD fans meet up at a somewhat random location. And so we're going, and we'd like for you to join us if you have a ride. We're going to meet outside Dartmouth Hall about 1:30. And if you want more details, then check out the event on Facebook. It's Dartmouth comes to XKCD, associated with our Facebook group. XKCD comes to Dartmouth. The party is also XKCD comes to Common Ground. So just type something like that into Facebook and it'll find it.
That's what she said.
That is literally what she said.
Yes, it is.